Have you ever noticed pedestals? Imagine a world without pedestals. I don't think you can. Welcome, friend. In just a few moments, the screen will quietly fade to black. There's nowhere else to be, nothing to keep track of, no rules to follow, nothing to remember, and nothing to solve. Just a little while set aside for noticing things. Our journey begins. In front of us stands a simple wooden pedestal. Today, it's empty. Not because it has nothing to offer, not because it has been forgotten, but because, before it begins, quietly supporting other things, the pedestal deserves to be noticed. So, before we place anything upon it, perhaps we should spend a little while getting to know the pedestal itself. It isn't a grand thing. There are no jewels set into its sides or elaborate carvings. No polished marble. Just warm wood, smoothed by careful hands. Made well, made to last. If you were to run your fingers across its surface, you might discover the faintest traces left behind of the things that rested there before. A vase, a lantern, a small bronze figure, a bowl filled with shells gathered one quiet afternoon beside the sea. Each stayed for a while, then quietly returned to the world. Now the pedestal waits again. Patiently. It has had thousands of years to practice. Perhaps that is one of the first things worth noticing about pedestals. They never seem to be in a hurry. For thousands of years, they've stood exactly where someone placed them, supporting, waiting, never asking for attention, only offering it to something else. This is quiet work, but then the quietest work often lasts the longest. Most of us have walked past hundreds of pedestals without ever really seeing them. They stand beneath statues in parks, or hold flower pots in gardens. They quietly lift treasured objects in museums and support family photographs on old tables. But every now and then, one simply waits, empty, ready for whatever comes next, for such an ordinary thing. The pedestal has had an extraordinary life. Its story stretches back thousands of years, across deserts, temples, gardens, museums, workshops, libraries, and countless homes where someone quietly decided, this belongs here. Now, rather than looking at what rests upon a pedestal, we'll spend a little while with the pedestal itself, because every once in a while, the things that spend their lives supporting others deserve to be noticed. Imagine, somewhere, thousands of years ago, someone noticed a stone. Not an especially beautiful stone, or even a rare one. Just one that seemed to catch their attention whenever they happened to pass by it. Perhaps it rested beside a familiar path. Maybe it waited near the place where they gathered water each morning. Without ever meaning to, they began looking forward to seeing it. It became one of those quiet things that slowly finds its way into a life. As familiar as an old tree or a favorite place to sit. There was nothing particularly remarkable about it, and yet, for reasons they may never have been able to explain, it simply felt worth keeping nearby. One day, they decided they didn't want to leave the stone just lying on the ground. Not because the ground was wrong, but perhaps, after all this time, it simply didn't feel like enough anymore. They found themselves wanting it to have a place of its own. So one day, they picked it up. It fit comfortably in their hands. They turned it over and held it gently for a while. Then quietly thought, this belongs somewhere. So they looked around, not for something extraordinary, but for something that felt right. Perhaps there was a broad, flat rock nearby, the worn stump of an old tree, or a smooth piece of fallen timber. Maybe even a natural shelf of stone. Anything that would lift it up just a little. Nothing grand or carefully built. Just something to set it apart. They placed the stone there and stepped back for a moment. They simply looked at it. It hadn't become more valuable. It hadn't become more beautiful. It was still the very same stone. And yet, something had changed. It felt complete. Not because the stone was different, but because it finally had a place where it belonged. Perhaps you've known something like that. Not something valuable. Nothing famous. Just something ordinary that quietly became part of your life. A smooth shell collected during a walk beside the sea. Maybe a feather discovered on an autumn afternoon. Perhaps a stone resting on the corner of a desk, or a coffee mug that somehow became the one you always reached for first. Their value was never measured in money, only in familiarity, in the quiet comfort of knowing exactly where they belonged. It seems, without ever intending to, they had created something entirely new. Not a monument, not a throne, not an altar. Just the quiet beginning of a pedestal. No one marked the day or wrote the moment down. No one imagined that thousands of years later, people all over the world would still be doing exactly the same thing, finding quiet ways to say, This belongs here. No one knows who first noticed the stone resting there, raised just a little above the ground. Perhaps only one person saw it that first day, or perhaps many people walked past without giving it much thought at all. But people have always watched one another, long before there were books, schools, or museums. There was quiet observation. Children watched their parents. Friends noticed what their neighbors were doing. Ideas have always traveled that way, not all at once, not because anyone planned them, simply because one thoughtful act sometimes becomes another. No one knows what the first person was thinking. Perhaps they simply loved the stone. Perhaps they wanted to protect it. Perhaps they found themselves wondering what it might look like if it were lifted just a little higher. Perhaps they were simply curious to see whether anyone else would notice. History is wonderfully quiet about such things. It leaves room for wondering. The people who passed by may have wondered too. Why that stone? Perhaps someone looked more closely than they ever had before and quietly thought, there must be something special about that stone that I never noticed. The stone hadn't changed, only the way people looked at it. A child might have wandered over, reaching out a curious hand, then paused, looking back towards a parent. Can I touch it? Yesterday it had been just another stone. Today, somehow, it felt different. No one had made a rule or given a speech. No one had asked anyone to admire it, and yet everyone understood that something had changed, perhaps for the very first time. An ordinary object had quietly begun speaking, without saying a single word. It spoke of care, attention, responsibility, perhaps even of stewardship. Not, this is mine, but rather, someone is looking after this. It spoke of respect and invited people to slow down, to pause, to notice, to wonder. The pedestal had become a silent conversation. It asked questions without ever asking them aloud. Why this? What makes it special? What do they see that I don't? And perhaps that is how many of our oldest traditions begin. Not with rules or explanations, but with one quiet act that others slowly begin to understand. Some may have copied the idea, not because they wished to imitate someone else, but because they too had found something that belonged somewhere. A shell unlike any they had ever seen. A feather with iridescent waves. A polished and carved bone. Each quietly lifted, just a little, above the world around it. Not because it had become more valuable, but because someone had decided it was worth noticing. The pedestal didn't invent wonder. It simply shared it. For a very long time, a pedestal might have been nothing more than a tree stump, a broad, flat stone, or a piece of weathered timber. Things borrowed from nature that would eventually return to nature. But people kept building. Villages became towns. Towns slowly grew larger. Ideas that once belonged to a single family slowly became shared by many. And little by little, people began making things they hoped would last. Slowly but surely, people discovered stone. Not simply as something beneath their feet, but as something that could outlast generations. They came to realize that stone could remember. Imagine a stone worker working beneath a brilliant desert sun. The sound of careful tools echoing against pale limestone. Hands rough and calloused from shaping stones day after day. Carefully smoothing every surface. Not because every mark would be noticed, but because he would know it was there. This time, they were not carving a king or a queen, not a god or a hero. They were shaping the stone that something else would one day rest upon. The pedestal would spend its life quietly and faithfully holding something that someone believed deserved to be noticed, without asking to be noticed itself. When the work was finally complete, it would be carefully set into place, strong enough to carry great weight, beautiful enough to honor whatever would one day rest upon it. The pedestal had changed, but perhaps also so did our understanding of it. No longer was it simply lifting a treasured stone found beside a familiar path. Now it lifted a memory, honor, faith, stories. The people who built these great stone places understood something remarkable. Some things deserve to be remembered long after a single lifetime had passed. The pedestal would continue to speak without words. Yet everyone understood what it said. Look here. Pause for a moment and remember. And so the quiet idea continued its journey, carried by travelers, builders, artists and families across deserts, rivers, mountains, and seas. Wherever people gathered, the quiet idea traveled with them. Lift something, even just a little, and people will see it differently. Because sometimes the thing being lifted isn't the object at all, it's our attention. Time continues its patient work. Cities become civilizations. The quiet idea continues to grow beside them. People no longer lift only treasured objects. Now they begin lifting shared meanings. A figure who represented courage, a symbol of protection. A teacher whose words had shaped a community, or a leader whose name people wanted to remember. Maybe a story given human form. The pedestal had become something more. Not simply a place to hold, but a place to honor. And this is where the story becomes more complicated. Because the pedestal itself never did the choosing. It did not decide who should stand above the crowd. It did not decide what was worthy, or beautiful, or brave, or wise. People did. The pedestal only held what it was given, quietly, steadily, and without judgment. In this way, it became a mirror, not of the person standing upon it, not only of the object it supported, but of the people looking up. Imagine walking into a great public square, the air warm with voices, footsteps crossing stone, merchants calling softly from shaded stalls, children weaving between adults. At the center, a figure rises above the crowd, perhaps carved from stone or cast in metal. Weathered by sun and rain, its face looks out over the square. Still, silent, unchanging. Beneath it, the pedestal waits, holding the figure high enough for everyone to see. Some people pass without stopping. Others pause for a moment. A child points upward. A traveler reads the inscription. Someone who has seen it every day for years barely notices it anymore. And yet, it remains there, asking the same quiet question again and again. What do you value? Not loudly, not accusingly, simply by standing there. The pedestal does not say this person was good, this victory was just, this memory should never change. It only says, someone once believed this deserved to be seen, remembered. That is a very different thing, and perhaps a very important one. because what people choose to raise tells a story. Sometimes it's a story of love, sometimes pride or gratitude, sometimes power, and sometimes hope. A pedestal in a public place is never only about what stands upon it. It's also about the hands that built it, the voices that approved it, the community that passes by it. Children who grow up beneath its shadow, and the future generations who might one day see it differently. Not everything lifted above the crowd deserves to remain there forever. Time has a way of asking questions that earlier generations never thought to ask. Sometimes a statue is moved or a name is forgotten. Sometimes yesterday's hero becomes today's lesson. The pedestal remains, quietly waiting for whatever comes next. There is something humbling in that. The pedestal may be made of stone, but the meaning it carries is never as permanent as the stone itself. Meaning moves quietly, slowly, from one generation to the next. What one age honors, another may question. What one family treasures, another may set aside. What one civilization lifts high, another may lower gently or topple with disregard. And still, the pedestal waits, not offended, not proud or disappointed, simply ready to hold the next thing. This is one of the quiet lessons pedestals have been teaching us all along. It is never the stone beneath that gives something meaning. It is the hearts of people looking up. Because every pedestal, whether standing in a public square, a temple courtyard, a garden, a museum, or the quiet corner of a home, eventually asks the same question. What are you choosing to notice? And perhaps just as important, why? Years become centuries. Centuries become stories. The world continues changing. Roads wander in new directions. Buildings rise and fall. Trees grow where walls once stood. Rivers choose new paths or dwindle into nothing. The people who first built the pedestals eventually become memories themselves. And still, some of the pedestals remain. Not because they refused to change, but because someone in every generation chose to care. A careful hand brushes away fallen leaves. A cracked corner is repaired. An inscription is read aloud. A flower is placed nearby. Almost without noticing, people become caretakers. Not only of stone, but of memory. Imagine walking through an old museum. The rooms are quiet. Your footsteps soften without anyone asking them to. Light slips gently through tall windows. Dust dances where the sun finds it. The air carries the quiet scent of old wood, cool stone, faded paper, and time itself. Some pedestals stand proudly in the center of the room. Others wait quietly in corners. Each holds something different. Ancient worn tools, a chipped ceramic bowl, tiny carved animals, a glittering crown of jewels, or a colossal stone sarcophagus. Each object survives something: a journey, wars, a storm, fire, a forgotten attic, time. Someone long ago decided it should not be lost. Perhaps they could never have imagined that hundreds of years later, a stranger would stop and smile and quietly wonder about the hands that once held it. It's a curious thing how ordinary objects become extraordinary. Not because they change, but because time changes around them. The bowl is still a bowl. The crown is still a crown. The stone is still only stone, and yet, the longer something is carried with care, the more gently we begin to hold it ourselves. Perhaps that is another quiet lesson. Value does not always arrive all at once. Sometimes it gathers. Little by little, with every generation willing to remember, not every treasure shines. Some treasures are worn smooth by countless hands. Some have faded. Some have missing pieces. In the museum, the chipped bowl sits only steps away from the regal sarcophagus, but each of them rests upon its own pedestal, both of them with tales to tell. Some reveal them only to those willing to linger. The pedestal understands this. It has never confused age with importance, or beauty with worth. It simply continues holding whatever someone has chosen not to lose. Perhaps this is why pedestals still find their way into our homes. A favorite photograph, a shell gathered during a quiet walk, or a clock that once belonged to a grandparent. A small statue on a bookshelf, a candle, or a single feather. None of them asked to be admired, yet somehow we notice them again and again. Without realizing it, we have given them a place, not because they are valuable to everyone, but because they are valuable to us. Perhaps every home contains quiet little pedestals, places where love has chosen to rest, places where memory quietly lives. Our own private museum, and perhaps without even knowing it, we become caretakers too. Morning arrives quietly without fanfare. Long before the garden fills with visitors, or the warmth of the afternoon settles over the winding paths, the gardener is already there. Not in a hurry, not with a grand plan, simply walking, one careful step after another, perhaps carrying a small watering can or a favorite woven basket, or nothing at all. The garden knows these footsteps. The birds scarcely pause as they pass. A rabbit briefly lifts its head, then quietly returns to breakfast. Butterflies drift gently from flower to flower. A fountain continues its song. Somewhere nearby, bees hum among the blossoms. The air carries the sweet fragrance of roses, fresh earth, morning dew, and growing things. The gardener pauses behind an old stone pedestal. Long ago, it may have stood in the courtyard of a great home, or beneath the covered walkway of a quiet monastery. No one remembers anymore, not even the gardener. Now, soft green moss fills its tiny cracks. A simple clay pot rests upon it, overflowing with tiny white flowers. The gardener brushes away a fallen leaf, straightens the pot, and touches one blossom with surprising gentleness, then smiles, as though greeting an old friend. Without realizing it, the pedestal has found another purpose. Some pedestals lift statues towards the sky. Others lift flowers towards the sun. Some hold bird baths where robins splash and sing. Others cradle climbing vines, or tiny bonsai trees patiently shaped over many years. One becomes home to a family of ferns. Another catches raindrops in a weathered stone bowl. No two gardens are quite the same. Yet every garden seems to understand that beautiful things deserve a place, not because they are rare, or expensive, or admired by many, but because they are alive. Gardens understand something that museums cannot. Nothing beautiful stays exactly the same forever. Each morning is different and special in its own way. A bud quietly opens. A blossom drifts gently to the ground. New leaves appear where yesterday there were none. Seeds become flowers, flowers become seeds. The pedestal remains, content to witness it all. Patient enough to know that change has always been part of beauty. The gardener never seems disappointed when a flower fades, because another one is already quietly on its way. The gardener knows. Perhaps caring for something is another way of honoring it, not by placing it high above the world, but by giving it a place where it can simply be itself. Perhaps that is another quiet lesson. The things we love most are rarely the things we simply admire. They are the things we care for, day after day, season after season, year after year. As the sun climbs higher and the garden slowly awakens, butterflies wander without a map, Dragonflies shimmer above a quiet pond. A breeze carries the soft scent of lavender through the air. Somewhere, a single bird begins to sing. The gardener gazes contentedly across the winding paths, at the flowers, the trees, and the weathered pedestals. Everything is slightly different than it was just a little while ago. Everything is exactly as it should be. The watering can is lifted once more. A few more blossoms are quietly tended. One last fallen leaf is brushed aside. Then, without a sound, the gardener continues down the path, leaving behind a garden that hardly seems to notice, except somehow everything feels just a little more cared for, and a pedestal waits to see what tomorrow will bring. The gentle breeze and warm sunshine gradually give way to the cool quiet of another kind of sanctuary, a place where footsteps is swallowed by the paneled walls and voices become whispers, not because anyone demands it, but because the room itself seems to expect it. Imagine opening a heavy wooden door. It closes gently but firmly behind you. The world outside continues on without you. Inside, time seems to move differently. The air carries the familiar scent of polished wood, faded paper, and quiet curiosity. Shelves stretch in every direction, some filled with stories, others with discoveries, maps, poems, letters, music, questions, answers, and countless things still waiting to be understood. A cat pads by silently, almost secretly. Near the entrance, a single book rests upon a simple wooden stand. Its pages are open as though it has been patiently waiting for someone to discover it. You stop and peer at an open page and step back before you're drawn into the story. Nearby, a globe of the ancient world rests upon an elaborate marble pedestal. Not to be admired, but to be explored. A sculpted owl watches silently from another. Its eyes seem to follow you as you move across the room. The farther you wander into the library, the more pedestals seem to appear. They present opportunities for thought and exploration. The bust of a poet, then a scientist and a philosopher, each quietly keeping company with the books below. Libraries lift ideas, just as pedestals lift objects. Perhaps that's why they feel strangely similar. Both ask us to pause. Both invite us to notice. Both quietly suggest this matters. The librarian moves quietly between the shelves, straightening a book, returning another, helping a child find their very first adventure, guiding an older visitor toward the one they thought they'd lost or forgotten. never in a hurry, knowing that every book finds its reader exactly when it should, and that perhaps some books change the world, while others change only one person. Sometimes that is exactly the same thing. The cat slips into the shadows as if it has access to another dimension. Perhaps it does. The librarian glances up, curious to see what you find interesting. The pedestal holding the open book waits, patiently, knowing someone will eventually arrive. Someone curious, someone searching, someone who doesn't yet realize that the next page may quietly change everything. The cat brushes gently against your leg and looks up at you, waiting to be noticed. Then, without a sound, it glides toward the heavy wooden door, stops, and glances back, waiting. The librarian smiles and gives you a knowing nod. You open the door. The cat slips through first, its tail held high. Curious, you follow. A small brass bell rings softly as the door opens. The shopkeeper looks up, smiles, then returns to dusting a shelf. The shopkeeper knows, left to wander unassisted, you'll find your own way, or perhaps the right object will find you. A sleepy little white dog lifts its head, studies you for just a moment, decides there's nothing to worry about, and settles back into a comfortable nap. The little shop seems to smile too. Sunlight spills gently through the front window, filling the room with a warm golden glow. The air carries the comforting scent of cedar, old leather, beeswax, and things that have been quietly loved for many years. Nothing seems hurried here. Nothing asks for your attention. Everything simply waits, patiently, along one wall. A cabinet filled with crystals catches the morning light. There are dozens of them. Clear quartz, smoky quartz, rose quartz, citrine. Each beautiful in its own quiet way, yet only one rests upon a pedestal. A single piece of amethyst, clear enough for the morning light to pass gently through it. Its deep violet heart slowly giving way to pale lavender near its delicate edges. Tiny worlds seem to shimmer within, as though the crystal has been quietly collecting little pieces of light for longer than anyone can remember. The sunlight passes through it, scattering tiny fragments of purple across the polished wood below. Its pedestal is hand-carved from dark walnut. Simple, elegant, just tall enough to quietly say, "Here, this one." Beside it, the other crystals seem perfectly content. None appeared disappointed. None seemed to wish for a pedestal of their own. Farther along, another glass cabinet holds brass compasses collected over the years. Some are closed, others stand open. Most rest quietly beside one another, but one, sits upon its own weathered wooden box. Its lid folded back, the needle drifts ever so slightly, as though still deciding, thinking, which direction matters most. Its wooden box became a pedestal without anyone ever having to call it one. Yet somehow it sets that particular compass apart from the others, simply by raising it a little higher than the rest. The farther you wander into the little shop, the more you begin to notice there are many types of pedestals here. Some are carved from marble, others from polished wood, some from driftwood gathered beside the sea, while others are nothing more than an old box, a folded piece of linen, or a smooth stone found on a quiet walk. Not all pedestals look like pedestals. The shopkeeper never speaks, but simply dusts, straightens, or moves a pedestal half an inch, then walks away. No explanation. No sign tells you why one object rests a little higher than another. No price suggests which one matters most. Only quiet observation and thoughtful care. The little brass bell rings again. The sleepy white dog opens an eye, recognizes the familiar footsteps, and returns to sleep. A young woman steps quietly inside. She carries a single seashell in her hand. Smooth, worn by countless tides. She places it gently upon the counter. The shopkeeper smiles, nods, then reaches beneath the counter and slides a tiny piece of blue sea glass toward her, its edges softened by years beneath the waves. She smiles too, picks it up, holding it to the light for just a moment. The sunlight catches it, and for just a moment, it glows blue like the ocean. Neither of them say a word. Neither needs to. Some things have a way of choosing their homes. As you make your way toward the door, you glance back one last time. The shopkeeper is already dusting another shelf. The little white dog is dreaming once again, and the amethyst still catches the afternoon light. The compass still searches quietly for north. Everything seems exactly where it belongs. There is one final place we have not yet visited. No road leads there. No map can show the way. No doorway waits to be opened, and yet you have carried it with you from the very beginning. Every pedestal we have visited has quietly asked the same question: what deserves to be lifted? What deserves a place of its own? A place where it can be noticed, remembered, protected, or simply appreciated. The answers have never belonged to the pedestal. They have always belonged to us. Perhaps that is why the most important pedestals have never been made of stone, or marble, or polished wood. They have been built quietly within us. Imagine meeting someone for the very first time. You know almost nothing about them, perhaps only their name. Then, little by little, you begin noticing things. The kindness in their smile, the patience in their voice, the way they make room for someone else's story, the way they speak to children or animals without realizing it. You're lifting them. Just a little sometimes. Not physically, mentally, emotionally. We build these quiet pedestals for teachers, parents, for friends, or artists, neighbors. Sometimes for someone whose name we never learn, only because they were unexpectedly kind. On an ordinary day, most of them would quietly climb back down if they could, not because they are unworthy, but because they know the nicest conversations rarely happen from above. They happen side by side. We do not build these quiet places for people. Sometimes we build them for moments. A porch swing that still rocks gently in memory. A favorite tree with branches perfect for climbing. Sunset over a deserted beach. Music that stays with you. A familiar laugh. None of these things became greater. We simply chose to lift them, ever so gently, to a quiet place within us where they still rest. Sometimes life quietly asks us to move a pedestal, not because something has become less important, but because we have come to understand it differently. A hero becomes human. A memory softens. A sorrow becomes gratitude. Not everything changes all at once. Some things simply find a new place to stand. Perhaps that is growing, not holding everything exactly where it has always been, but allowing our hearts to quietly rearrange the things they love until they fit. The happiest place is rarely upon a pedestal. It's usually beside someone else, looking at the same sunrise, sharing the same story, walking the same quiet path. Perhaps the pedestals within us were never meant to separate us, only to remind us what we have chosen to hold close. And if you listen very carefully, you may discover that your heart has been quietly building them all along. And so now, a quiet breeze begins to stir. Somewhere not far away, the pedestal stands patiently, just as it always has. No statue rests upon it, no crown, no crystal, no flower, no book, only the open sky above. The breeze drifts softly past, carrying with it one tiny grain of sand. The breeze slows and ever so gently places the grain of sand upon the center of the empty pedestal. Without ceremony, without applause, without anyone there to notice except the pedestal itself. And yet this grain of sand now seems to be exactly where it belongs. Perhaps that was always the quiet lesson. Nothing is too small to be noticed. Nothing is too ordinary to be appreciated. Nothing is too humble to deserve a place of its own. The world has always been filled with quiet things, patiently waiting for someone to notice them. Perhaps today, that someone is you.